Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here at the library of the Budapest Music Center at another evening in the Must Meet Composer series. And I warmly welcome Fabián Panisello, who is our guest here and during this week at the Budapest Music Center and organized by this by the Péter Eötvös Contemporary Music Foundation. I usually, as a host of this series, I start with a very simple question. What is music for you?
Very simple.
Yes, it's a simple question.
Thank you very much. Good evening for everybody. Music is a complex of many things for me. Music is a door to knowledge, to our experience of beauty, to open ourselves, to learn, and to try to, for me, understand the universal things that are inside us. I don't think it's a subjective thing. I think it's a universal thing happening also in our spirit, and we can try to connect with this flow, enormous flow of energy and of intelligence, and we have the help of so many generations since thousands of years of people, generous people, giving the best of themselves for our knowledge, for our learning, for our practice in this. I cannot define this. It's impossible for me to do a definition. This is only a touch of what I think. It's also a way of communicating in a high level with many other people. And sometimes I think that we exist in this time, but the former times and the future times are also now here because of music. That music is something that can escape to temporality, can try to, and that learn us a way of infinity.
That was not a simple answer, but it was.
Excuse me.
Really deep. Thank you. You were born in Argentina, then you studied in Austria, and you are based now in Spain. And I mean, Buenos Aires and Salzburg and Madrid are quite different. That's what I think. How these three routes, if I can call it like this, how did it affect your music and your thinking?
Buenos Aires was the city where I was born. I lived many years until 20-something. And then this is a city full of immigrants, and many generations of people came to Argentina to live. There are a big colony of Spanish people, of Italian people. This is the third biggest Jewish community in the world. You have people from Ukraine, from Russia, Hungarian people. My teacher was Hungarian, but he was 4 when he immigrated to Argentina. His name is Francisco Kröpfel, and he's Austrian-Hungarian, born in Cluj, as in Transylvania. And then there are also from many nationalities, German immigrations to Argentina, one before the war, 30 years before the war, the other one painfully after the war, which was a Nazi immigration. So we had a chrysal of things there. And the good side of this, there are many, was that my mother was but now is very old, but also continue writing, a theater person. Yeah, she was director of theater, and then I read many things, very different things when I was very young already. Thanks this, because when I came to Austria, I remember to talk with my friends and colleagues there And for them, for instance, talk about French literature, also about Debussy, was strange. So they were more oriented to own culture, which is very big and very important. Not the German-speaking culture. But for me, to read to Russian literature or French or German or whatever, I didn't see the difference with all these different things, which was for me a kind of a school of opening my mind and the tolerance. That was the reason why I left Argentina, was that for music was not the good place, was too far from every other city. There are institutions in Argentina that are very nice, like Teatro Colón, for instance. It's marvelous. And there are people, which is wonderful. So I love Argentina and Argentinians, I have to say. I have many friends there, and I travel every year. And I really love there. I work sometimes. I conduct there, I do projects, I present my music. This, yes. But for living as a musician in an isolated city, which is not so good furnished with an economy for this, is very complicated. Then Salzburg was like a cold shower for me, because Argentina is
like
also...
Like for Mozart.
No, that's why I love the Austrian music. That's not the point. The contemporary Austrian life, for me, was a shock at the beginning. I didn't understood very well what it is, but it was, I think, a cultural shock. I had to learn German, and then I had to learn so many things new in my innocent Argentinian background, you know. That was difficult at the beginning, but at the end, I learned through the language many, many things. I started to understand why the music of Bach is like this, because of the language, and the former music, because of the language. I am convinced that language and music are crowded together, speaking and making music and phrasing. And then all this was a big influence, a very important thing in the experience. And Madrid was consequence of the time. When I was already in Salzburg, I wanted to write an opera. I met a Spanish composer who composed many operas. Luis de Pablo is his name. And Luis invited me to go to Madrid for 1 year with a scholarship after my times in my diploma in Salzburg. Then I went. I didn't compose this opera at the time. That was 20 years ago, because I was not prepared for this. I was not. I composed 40 minutes of the music. I never played this music. This music is already in the gavette, yeah? But then I founded my ensemble, plural ensemble at the time, and then I was invited to the school Reina Sofia to work there, and I found later a very nice sponsor, this BBVA Foundation, which gave the important prize to Mr. Kurtak. And these people support me, and I was having the impression that it's a very positive place to be, to work.
You mentioned Bach and how German language affected your understanding of Bach's music. The first piece we are going to hear, choral reflections for solo viola, is somehow connected Bach, if I'm right. Could you please explain the basic idea behind writing choral reflections to a solo string instrument, and what is choral in this piece?
This piece is derived from my last theater work, which is Le Roi Mage. Le Roi Mage, with a text of Michel Tournier, is based on the story of the three kings. And I put the story in a pre-Christian context, but on the one side. On the other side, I put the story in a cosmic context. I did work with an astronomer for this. And the mise-en-scène of the piece, the staging of the piece, is a video. We took many images of the deep field in the universe, and of different comets and galaxies and super clusters and these kind of things. And I asked a video artist to do a film about this, because the whole piece round about the idea of the cosmic nature of the human being. I wanted to express this idea. Yeah, it's the die to my eldest
Which is
son.
an old idea coming from the Middle Ages. Like, you know, the
Yeah.
music is the mirror of the universe.
Yes, it is. But that was in my case about my son and his birth, but that's another story. But then I was doing this, and then in a moment I do a kind of association with our Christian culture, and I took 3 chorals of Bach in F sharp, F and G. That is for violin in the original. Then here is transpose a 5th lower, and I put these 3 in a kind of choral. But it's a choral of 3 chorals, yeah? Let's say of this, I took some elements of the melodies and I put together with different modes of attack.
But the choral cannot be heard.
You
in the
listen
piece.
you listen some threads of the choral. So if this is a piece you need to work long with an interpreter, but because to find the lines, yeah, and to find the real way to show this up. We had only a meeting today of 15 minutes with the interpreter. We couldn't work literally. So, but he found many things, and but the idea is this. And the second part of the piece is built-in, which is a character of the opera also. Built-in is a girl from Phoenicia. And I found a musicologue, a friend of mine, sent me in cuneiform, in stone, a melody of a hymn, of Phoenician hymnus of 1,500 years before Christ, so very old. And then I use this.
Okay, let us listen now to Choral Reflections and Built-in by Fabián Panisello, performed by András Kurgyis. Karl-Heinz Stockhausen wrote about you that I'm happy to see that the spirit of Webern continues to live in a changed world. Is Webern that important for your, as a reference point, Anton Webern's music? For you?
It is, yeah. I don't know why he says this, but probably it's true. It's not the only one who's said to me this. Another friend, musicolog, said the same. Probably yes, had an influence of synthesis and polyphony, things that in many of my works.
And what do you think changed word means in this sentence? Like how did the word changed?
No, because probably he means that in my music there is some rhetoric, and in Webern's music, yes, but less and more kind of poetic typus, and I look in another size of text. Probably this is the change word he means could be.
You are both a composer and a conductor. Was it always? I mean, did you have always this double aim to be both, or was it a coincidence, or it's and how does it affect the two professions?
No, there are no coincidences. When I was younger, I was playing viola, piano, and I used to write when I was very young. Then that was already many things. Then I wanted really to be composer very young and started to study this and stop with instruments because the practicing every day of two instruments was very hard. So I wanted to work in composition. Then I stopped with the piano first, thinking that probably I could be a violist and make my living as a violist. But later I decided not to do this. And I concentrate in composition many years. But to be an interpreter of my own music was always important. And for me, a musician who does also interpretation is a very typical case. There are so many musicians that need to participate in the interpretation. And then learning this, more and more, I need to do also repertoire. First, the repertoire of my contemporaries, and then also the masters, and continue opening more and more wide the repertoire I do. And it was kind of natural issue in my case.
But being the conductor of others' music and the music of repertory, does it, I'm curious about the influence of conducting others' music on your compositions and your compositional thinking. So I think, aren't you more free if you don't interpret the music of others?
The influence is more by the musicians. I learned from the musicians many things, working with musicians, because the musicians knows very well the instruments. The good musicians know so many secrets about the instruments, and I love instruments. And then I like to talk with them about possibilities. Sometimes I am in the summer house composing, and then I compose something for orchestra, and I need some information about the tuba that I don't know, if you can do from B to B flat, the complicated moments in the tuba, and then I call my tubist and I ask, and the same with bassoon or other instruments, or if I need some help, and my friends, they play for me in the phone. I can listen, the problems, and I can solve some things. But the practice is very important, because you do so many mistakes, as composer, as artists in general. You learned through the mistakes. So you have a good school, more or less, but then you learn doing things. And then you compose some things that sometimes are not in the best register of the instrument, or are not so sounding as you want, or you put fortissimo, but the fortissimo there is not good, another string, or there are so many details all the time too. And then if you are in touch with the instrumentalist, you learn step by step many things, and that's good for your music. And then conduct the music of other people is not so, that's not the problem of influence. The influence in my case is when I analyze music. When I analyze in detail something, that is an influence for me. To conduct is more a kind of relax of myself.
And does it mean that you don't finalize a piece before you heard it performed?
Well, I correct the pieces after first performance, correct things, and continue correcting. Every time I listen the piece again in a good interpretation, then I change things sometimes, the dynamics, or some pieces are more or less closed, but other pieces are open.
During this course here, one of the pieces is your chamber concerto, which will be performed at the Sunday closing concert. And we are going to listen now to the second movement of it, which refers and uses melodies by late medieval and early Renaissance composers. Why did you use these melodies, and what is your relationship to tradition? Do you steal ideas, borrow ideas from old dead composers?
I wanted to work, when I did my Magisterarbeit, my master written work was about
thesis.
Was about African rhythmic, and compare with a system I learned with my professor in Argentina, Francisco Krepfer, who synthesized rhythmic issues of modern music. And then I was doing kind of study among the two systems of organization of rhythm and patterns and metric and polymetrics and polyrhythmic and things like this. And then this piece was inspired by the African polyphony, and also by the medieval polyphony indirectly because of the hoquetus technique. I wanted to do a quadlibet here, and with hoquetus technique, but putting this in another context. This is polymodal, the piece, and the modulations of the same melodies appear in this movement 3 or 4 times in a different modulation. but it's a polyphonic piece all the time with occhetus technique. And then I do a modulation into a pentatonic, evocating the African origin of the idea, and I finish in a polypentatonic linear music, which for me was a kind of a palette, you know, of modulating into unexpected things for the material of origin, but using melodies, original modal melodies that you can recognize at the beginning, and which change quite a lot later because of the modulations. I think it's clear to listen. Yeah.
Okay, now let us listen to the second movement of the chamber concerto by Fabián Panisello. It is entitled Cantico, and it is performed by Plural Ensemble, conducted by the composer himself.
Thank you.
You teach composition, if I read it well, both in Beijing and Madrid. I have a lot of questions about that, but two questions just to start with this topic. How can you teach composition? So what do you expect from the students?
Well, I have to say I am quite new in this because I was doing other things, but now I was invited to do these activities from this season in Beijing, and next season I start also in at the Reina Sofia School of Music. Then, look, I'm planning the work. I think it's a very personalized work. When I remember when I was a student, I know a student needs hardly many things, you know. You need a lot of buses. You need listening what you are doing and what the others do. Also listen the music, not only compose or produce, but also listen. It's very important. Then you need technique. You need to know the story of the music, and also the new tendencies. So to have a palette that poco a poco helps you to do your own language. So you need a lot of things. Then what I am doing now this year for so in China is I have a group of these people already studied. They are master and doctor people, and then there are people that with experience, and with them it's a kind of work because they already write music. Most of them quite conservative music, a bit like film music.
Like conservative Western music.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. Curiously, it's similar than the American composers I met in California in schools, or I met the same kind of tendency. Yeah, more in the East Coast of America, you see more people like in Europe, but on the other side, it's more like so kind of easygoing music, which I don't understand how you can compose this today. Well, in China, my work is to orientate these people to other models and to other techniques and to other aims. To teach composition, I think, is also to talk about a lot of backgrounds of the things, and not only musical, and to make the culture and the curiosity of the people bigger than they really alone can continue lines of research of many things. Composing is not that simple like compose a technique. It's a big conflict to compose. And then you need to have somehow to have reference things in the culture to do this. And then in Spain, what I am doing now is a good team, a good project. So for instance, the master degree will be oriented to monodrama, musical theater, and opera, our master degree. Because I love this so much, and then I would like really to work in this direction with young people. I think I can help in this direction. And the normal degree, then I was surrounding me with very nice, very good professors for different things. For electronics, I have fantastic one from Berlin, which is Alexis Baskind. And for instrumentation, I have the best in Spain who wrote also 4 very interesting books about instrumentation. He's a composer also. He's coming from Barcelona to the school. And as assistant professor, I was having many interviews, and what I wanted was someone who knows very well also the historical techniques, because we will work both contemporary and historical techniques all the time. And I found a perfect professor for this, and this was my work with the school. And next season we start, and in 2 years I can tell you, yeah.
And you said that around the Pacific, like on the west coast of America and in Asia, there are a lot of composers writing conservative music, like film music style music, and you would like to do something different, something new. I have this experience, maybe this is true for musicologists, I'm not sure if it's true for composers, that there are some musicologists who are really deep in contemporary music, or say music after the Second World War, but they don't really know the history of music. And I'm not sure if those composers, young composers who have new ideas, how much they are involved in old things. Do you think it is important to invent new things, to know everything that happened before?
Everything is difficult to know, but I think
the most you can.
No, yes, the most you can, yes. I think it's important not only to know, but also to write exercises in style. I think to write in styles of former times of the music is a very useful thing. My teacher, when I went to him in Buenos Aires to learn, Krepfel, he says to me, now first, before you came to me, you go to this teacher, he was his ex-student, was already a very fine composer, and you learn tonal music complete with him. You don't come to me before you do this. And it was 3 years doing every week so exercises and compositions from Baroque or Renaissance also, until post-Romanticism, because that was a rule for my teacher. And well, I think that was very good for me. I learned many things, I enjoy, and also now there is a tendency in many places not to do this, but I believe in this. Then I will do in my school, yes, we will do both, and depending of the needs and also of the lacks of everyone, very personalized. We will have only 5 or 6 students. So now we have the auditions in April. Then the idea is that everyone has a good musical culture. Yes.
You said that stage music is very important for you, and opera, and you wrote several operas. When I listened to this movement, the second movement of the chamber concerto, I thought about these melodies like actors, and I thought about the job you did, some kind of stage director telling the different melodies to go that way, and so. Are you like Mozart, who always wrote operas, even if he wrote a sonata or a piano concerto? So you are always thinking in operatic terms?
No. I arrived to opera in the last years. Before I was a normal instrumental composer, I did some vocal pieces because I always liked this. But in one of my pieces, Libro del Frío is the name, for soprano and ensemble, with poems of Antonio Gamoneda, one of the main writers in Spanish language. He's 90 years old now, he's alive, and we are very good friends. He's a magnificent writer. He's a Cervantes Prize, and is a prominent writer in Spanish language. Well, then I put music to his poems, and in this piece, that 13 parts, in one of the songs, I discovered that one of the character was dramatic, was not anymore lyric. It started to be independent and be dramatic and say things that I didn't preview, was something she wanted to say, let's say, the character. I was surprised with this. In the rehearsals, in the recording, we recorded this for a CD in Israel, and I said, look, this is strange. And then next piece was a piece I did for Alte Oper Frankfurt for baritone and piano, and was already the second part a monodram, and the first part, one of the leader was, the character was divided into speaking with himself and singing, speaking. I did this kind of intuitive. Next piece was a monodrama, and I put a baritone with a string quartet with 2 texts. One text of the Old Testament and one text of Henri de Luca, another great poet, Italian one. He wrote this especially he wrote a text. He's expert in Old Testament, in Aramaic. He speaks and understands very well Old Hebrew, but he's absolute atheistic. It's a very strange case, yeah. But he's very respected in Israel because of this, but he lives in Italy. And then he wrote for me a text, and the text was about Ezekiel, of the book of Ezekiel in the Bible. And then to understand well the text, it was very, very related to this. I read the original text, and then I looked for a translation which were not the romantic translation of the Bible we are used to read. In Spanish, we used to read the French translation of 19th century, but that was was a very old, let's say, and rough translation, which I like very, very much because of the quality of the intensity of the text, short text by Ezekiel book. And then I decided to do one character divided in two, one baritone divided in 2 characters, a poet and a prophet, talking Hebrew and talking Italian. And he was also the orchestra, the ensemble, string quartet. They had a microphone and they play and say text in the same time, Hebrew text, because I did the prosody of the music about this text. And the whole thing was like this. There was almost theater, you know. And my next piece was already my first opera, Les Malentendus.
We have a scene from Le Malentendu.
Less than a scene. We have
or
5 minutes.
An excerpt from the opera, the production of Neue Oper Wien. How did you find the piece of Camus, which is the basis of this opera?
I have the luck to have a very nice librettist in Madrid, which is Juan Lucas. He is very cultivated and loves literature and writes very well. Then we were looking for a subject because Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires asked me for the piece. And then that was a co-production. That was Teatro Colón together with Neue Oper Wien, Warsaw Autumn, and Madrid Teatro Real, this co-production. And then we will look for text. We were looking, reading many, many things, Oscar Wilde, and a lot. And then when we read this piece, I knew this piece in Argentina many years ago, but I forgot. I said, this is perfect for this.
Would you please just introduce this excerpt, the scene we are going to listen?
Well, so this is a part of the end of the piece. At the very end, but not the end, but before the end. Well, this is a moment when the story, very short, is a story of a man who goes from a small town to the Mediterranean Sea, because this is the dream of the family, to go to the Mediterranean. They are probably in Bohemia somewhere. Camus put the people in Bohemia. And then they're very poor, and they have a small hotel there. This young man goes with 20 years to the Mediterranean and disappears. And the sister was 5 when he went, and the mother was already widow of someone. They were alone. And these 2 women continue doing the hotel, but in a moment they turn into criminals, and they start to kill the wealthy men coming to the hotel. And then they do a somnifer to sleep. They steal all the money, and they bring the bodies into the river. 20 years later, the man comes back because he's rich. He's very happy. He has a beautiful lady, a wife, and they come together incognito to say, I am here, and now I bring you with me to the Mediterranean to do our Arcadia dream. But he doesn't know how to tell the mother, I am your son. The mother is very old, doesn't see very well with glasses, and doesn't recognize him. And the sister was very small, also doesn't recognize him. Only the old servant recognizes him. There's also an old servant which doesn't speak, through the whole piece, only observes. He knows very well. He's also a criminal, but he's for Camus like the God of the Old Testament. He's a God without compassion. Then, so the people suffers. For him is the same. And then that is at the end when the wife of him, after he was killed, so because the malentendu is misunderstanding. There are many misunderstandings, and then during the opera is 1 hour and 40 minutes. It's difficult to reduce, but many misunderstandings. And in the moment, then the man is already dead, and the wife next day comes to look for him, but he was, because of misunderstanding, was killed. And this is the scene where the discussion between Marta, the sister, and Maria, the wife.
pas une plaisanterie. Vous n'avez plus rien que faire ici. Vous parlez en langage que je ne comprends pas. J'entends mal les mots d'amour, de joie. Écoutez, c'est chaud, c'est sonneto. Dites-moi bien comment c'est que je veux savoir. Plus clair que j'ai l'été. Si vous voulez le savoir, il y a eu malentendu. Et pour peu que vous connaissiez le monde, vous ne vous en étonnerez pas. Oh mon Dieu, je savais que cette comédie ne pouvait être insolente. Était dans ce ciel, elle voulait se
The opera got really enthusiastic reviews, as I read. How much do you care about the reactions of on your music, like the public, or what the public's reaction, or the critique, what the critics write about your music?
I think the music is something between composer, musicians, and audience. And then what happens with one of three parts is important. This is so important, and what happens with yourself, if you think is a good work or not, or the musicians say to you, or you see in the faces they don't love your music. Well, the audience is the same. As you know, this audience is very mysterious, it's very varied, it's always different people, qualified people, less qualified people, you never know. But I think the atmosphere of the whole thing is something that gives you an answer about your going through music, no? It's just, it's just like an impression you get of what happens with this. And normally, if you continue composing and you continue having opportunities, it's because the things go more or less well. But I am not a fetishist about critics, or, I think it could be, depends who does it. I don't know how it is here in Hungary. In our country, sometimes you see 3 or 4 critics of different media that are very similar. They say, who copy whom? you don't know who was the first who thought something, or they don't know exactly what to say. Depends. There are sometimes fantastic critics. I mean, from contents that you see the person who is writing understood and have an idea about things, and sometimes not.
I think that was the case all the time. I mean, throughout history. We have one more piece to listen to, Canciones de Silvia. Could you please give us an introduction to this song cycle?
Yeah, this is a friend of mine, the poet, Silvia Davul, who proposed me and other composers to compose pieces with her poems, and she did a CD recording. She's from Argentina. And these are very short texts and illustrate. The first one, asana is a position in yoga. It's about this. The second one, dervish, is like the dancer in Sufi dance. The third is pregunta, question. It's a question. And the form of the piece is like a question. Yeah. And the fourth is a very special thing. The fourth is that was a friend of ours. Is a flute player. She was pregnant and she got twins, and one of the twins died the same day of the birth, and the other is a girl who is now 20 years old or 25, and he is in perfect state. And the poet wrote something about this case, this particular, and about Natal, who was the name of the death one. And then I was working with the idea, also with some intervallic. At the end of the piece, you see there is a conflict between F and D sharp, and in a moment you listen D, and then D sharp D, D sharp D. In this, coming from a chromatic chord, this relationship opening from D sharp to D, and as from major second to minor third, was a kind of hope to the mother to have the connection open between the people being there and the people which is here. It's a metaphoric use of this, and this is.
Okay, let us listen now to the song cycle entitled Canciones de Silvia, performed by Imai Ayan and Emese Mali.
Según la teoría acústica, el silencio absoluto es solamente en condiciones de vacío lo nombramos silencio. Es nada más menos que invasión de forma inaudible.
I know you had a really busy day, and you're going to have another one tomorrow, so thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thank you very much for this talk. It's time to finish now, and I just want to say to you that the closing concert of the International Workshop for Conductors will be on Sunday, on the 23rd of February at 6 p.m. in the concert hall of the Budapest Music Center, where you can, among other pieces, listen to the whole chamber concerto of Mr. Panisello. So thank you for coming, and let's meet on Sunday, and thank you for being with us.
The concerto will also include pieces of the mentee composers. They are also working very hard this week with very talented conductors. Then I wish the best for this concert. And I think all this fantastic initiative contributing and supporting the young generations of conductors and composers is really amazing. Bravo also for you.
Thank you.